Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee. So good to be here today, and this as we're closing out summer here, at least in the northern hemisphere. So welcome today, and I would love for you to share again where you're coming from, and also how are you getting people, your top leaders and executives, on board with generative AI. I would love to hear what has worked for you, some of the best practices you've seen. Again, this is a constant issue because while there's a lot of talk about generative AI and a lot of activity, there's this gap between where leaders are and where they need to be in order to drive a strategic use of deployment of generative AI. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, and in particular why it's so difficult to get leaders and your executives on board. And it's kind of a common idea, and it's something that I've seen not only happening with generative AI, but with many other different types of technologies or different types of change. And so I just thought I'd go through it, and I have some slides here today. Let me just get those slides out here, and let's see, I'm going to post them too as well. If somebody could post onto LinkedIn, I would really appreciate it because for whatever reason, I can't comment onto LinkedIn. So if you could add that, it's charlenelee.com/get leaders on board. And so a couple reasons why it's so difficult for leaders to put their heads around generative AI. First of all, it really feels tactical. A lot of the things that generative AI is really good at are really focused on productivity and efficiencies. It's about getting the work that you do done in a better, faster, more efficient way. And so they're kind of like, well, I'm kind of up here. I'm focused on these other strategic issues. I've got a lot of fires I have to put out. You want me to go pay attention to how we can write content faster? Just deal with it. And so, and then the last part of it is that they themselves are personally not very comfortable with AI. And this is a very important thing. I think this is the one of the biggest issues when it comes to AI, in that there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of excitement around it, but also a lot of fear. And that keeps a lot of leaders from jumping in. So they don't think it's really that strategic. It's fairly tactical, focused on productivity and efficiency, and they don't really have a literacy, literal, sorry, AI literacy around how to use AI themselves. And so a couple of things that is happening. I call this a fun little thing called fogey and versus FOMO. So FOMO, I think many of us are familiar with, fear of missing out. There's a lot happening with AI. Things seem to be going like gangbusters. So we need to catch up. We're missing out on this. And at the same time, there's a sense of fogey, which is fear of getting in because so many things could happen. The technology is constantly changing. There's a lot of uncertainty around it. It's not really proven. We don't know what the ROI is, what the value is. So, what I find oftentimes in these discussions with executives and their leaders in organizations is that there's FOMO on one side. I want to get in, and then fogey on the other side. Well, I fear getting in. So, how do you actually go about overcoming this? And again, I would encourage you to ask any questions that you have. And by all means, please share how you're getting top leaders on board with your generative AI initiatives. So, a couple things that I think is happening here. It's so important to get your leaders on board. And they themselves are experiencing something, again, this fogey versus FOMO situation. But in particular, I think what we're going through right now is what I call a knowing, doing, leading gap. The leaders know that AI is important. They aren't actually using it themselves. And then as because they're not actually using it themselves, they haven't experienced the power of generative AI. So they can't see its strategic implications beyond just what's out there to do productivity and efficiency. And so they don't see the transformational power. If they don't experience it themselves, there's no way they're going to step into a leadership role and take on the strategic challenges of transforming the organization. So, for those of you who have experienced generative AI, firsthand, you go, wow, this is great. There's so many things we can do with this. This is a game changer. And as somebody who has been in the technology space since the beginning of the internet, I started in newspapers, putting them online in the mid 90s. So have my hands very dirty with lots of experience bringing these technologies on board and then having executives feel comfortable with them. And what you realize is that when you look at generative AI, there are certain characteristics of it that make it completely different and highly transformational. And so it's sort of you feel like you're pulling your hair out in some ways. Like, don't you get it? Don't you see it? Come on, leaders. Come on, execs. Get on board with this. And the reality is they haven't experienced it themselves. And until they do, they're not going to be able to truly understand what's going on, how it's going to make a difference. Until they are personally transformed by using these tools, they're not going to be on board. So one thing in particular I'd like to just share is a quick story. And this is I just have a simple illustration of a stoplight. And the whole idea of this case study is a leader who a CEO of about 500-600 people in a company and said, we're going to be AI first, AI ready. And what that means is that everyone who's a knowledge worker in this organization is going to know how to use AI. And we're going to get all of you training. Here is a list of pre-approved tools, and everyone's going to get trained. And everyone's going to get a dashboard with lights next to them, green, yellow, and red. You get a green light if you're using these tools to get your work done. Fantastic. You're AI ready. You're using AI first. You get a yellow light if you're trying, but you haven't quite gotten there, but you're in the game. You're in the mix. You're figuring it out. And you get a red light if you're not even trying. And then this is the important thing. He said in 6 months' time, there will be no more red lights at this company. You'll either be using it in some degree as a yellow light or using it all the time as a green light, or we'll have an agreement that this is not the place for you. Again, as an organization, we need everybody to be AI ready. And the reason I tell you that story is that it takes a leader with conviction that this is the thing that is important to the organization. In order for us to be successful, to be competitive in this marketplace, we need to use these tools, understand where they work, what their capabilities are, what are the limitations. It is not to say that generative AI is going to be the silver bullet to everything of all of our problems, but it's very important, especially for the leaders of an organization, to say we need to adopt, to understand, to play with these things, to use these tools to better understand what they can do, what they can't do, and then apply them to very specific problems in our business. So a couple things. Again, please ask any comments, ask any questions, add any comments as we go along here. I'm going to take some time in just a second to address some of those questions. So a couple things, ways to get leaders on board. The first thing, and I have found this to be true with any new technology or change you want to create, you have to understand the top 3 strategic objectives of that leader. It doesn't matter where they are in the organization. What are the top 3 things that leader works up every single morning and says, these are the most important things we have to get done today, this week, this month, this quarter? Because if it's not on that list, if what you're proposing isn't aligned with what they think is important, they're not going to care. And it's a lot harder to convince a leader to say, well, those top 3 things, you need to replace them with a different one. So you're much better off saying, well, how does generative AI support, advance, defend against for each of those strategic objectives that leader has? And so you're putting it into context for that leader. And this is so important because you're doing the heavy lift of trying to understand how generative AI can advance the strategic objectives of your organization. Now, what doesn't work is for you to show up and have a fancy demo and to show them all the things that ChatGPT can do. Because the leader is going to say, so what? Why does this matter? So being able to apply it to your strategic objectives is extremely important. And one very important thing to do as part of this is to shift from thinking about generative AI use cases. So, this is what AI can do, to what are the applications and the initiatives it can create to solve these very large problems. And it's a small and very simple semantic change, but it's different because use cases implies that it is a simple thing, it's a tiny little thing that we can do. It's experimental, temporary. We're just going to experiment with all these different use cases. And you end up with hundreds and thousands of use cases that are not necessarily tied to strategic objectives. The difference with applications is that you're applying generative AI to address a very particular problem. And if you think about what leaders do, they are constantly thinking about how to solve problems, how to come up with solutions. And if you can provide and show how generative AI can be one of those solutions, then it's going to be something that they pay attention to. And then the last part is to create experiences for them to uh, have an experience with generative AI to understand how transformational it is. And I can't emphasize this enough, and I'll talk a little bit more in greater detail about how to do that in just a second. Because when you can experience generative AI and understand how it's going to change the way we work, then you see the building blocks of how it can extend and augment people, even automate the things that we don't want to do anymore, make life easier. And then we can go from there to see how that can escalate into larger initiatives and applications of Gen AI. So, one of the things I think is so, so important is that again, these are some things that I'll give you. You can see some of this other things in here. Did a whole webinar on how to get started. And the first thing is to set up a secure AI playground. And then it's very important to make sure that you can go and get all of that. All that you can safely use tools like ChatGPT in a safe environment where you know that you're not using that the models are not using your information to train the model, and so therefore you have greater confidence that what you're putting into the model, it could be questions, it could be strategic plans, your marketing plans are staying confidential. And I'll just put the link for this webinar into the comments here. And again, if somebody's on LinkedIn, they can go and add that to that. Be super helpful. And so one of the areas I think is so important is to set up that AI playground and then train your top two levels of executives. And because the top two levels of executives are the ones who drive the strategy and implement the strategy of the organization. And unless those leaders are trained on the power of generative AI, they're not going to be able to unlock that power. And so it's so important, I think, to get the top two levels of your executive teams, of your leadership, to know, to have hands on experience with AI. I will say that I have been talking about AI for the past year and a half. And when I ask audiences, how many of you know about AI? And all the hands go up. And I go, how many of you have tried it and use it? And most of the hands stay up. How many of you are using it every day? All the hands go down. And it's typically between 10 and 20% of the audience, and it has stayed pretty stable like that over the past 6 months. And it's astounding to me that we think about it, we know it, we're not actually doing it. And if we're not doing it, we can't lead it. And then finally, the last thing I would encourage you to do is to share the learnings. Instead of each person learning how to use AI, have a place. It could be a Slack channel, it could be a Google Doc, but share how you're using AI. Have some prompts that you are constantly using and treat those prompts as IP, very valuable intellectual property. It's a great role for your knowledge management people to step in and start collecting these best practices of how to use these tools. Now, one of the things I think is so important here is that when you're thinking about executives and how they're going to use these tools, um, thinking about how to train the actual leaders on how to use these tools is a very, very important step. And there are a couple best practices I think here. Again, I talked a little bit about it before, but you have to tie it to one of their strategic objectives. Because if they care about something, they will be curious. If they care about their objective, they'll be curious about how to use generative AI to achieve those objectives. So, if one of the top objectives is really going out and opening new markets, then we can say, well, generative AI can help us understand those markets, understand the feedback, look at the analysis, and in real time gauge our marketing, create new types of marketing that can be personalized to each of those new customers. So be like, oh, tell me more about that. How can we do this? Because this is a very strategic audience for us. How can we use AI to engage with them? The other thing that you can do is to use AI and show them how they can do the things they already know how to do. I think this is such an important thing because they're thinking, well, AI, I can write really well. I can do all these things really well. Why do I need AI? And if you can show them how they can do the job better, faster, with less effort, they can then say, oh, this is a tool I want to use all the time. So instead of teaching them how to do new things with generative I encourage you to think about ways to take the things that they already know how to do and use AI because then you really truly see the transformation. You're using AI to actually get work done that you do every single day. And then finally, just to get started, because of that fogey, the fear of getting in, really encourage you to have training and exercises that don't necessarily require using any confidential company information. Again, in the beginning, you're still trying to build trust with the AI, with the executives on how to use AI. And one of the concerns is, well, how is my data going to be used? So instead of thinking about using highly confidential information, use stuff that's publicly available, things that are not going to be highly confidential in using the AI. So, one of the things I do want to do is just give you a couple quick examples just to wrap up. And then again, they have a lot of different slides here today. Sorry, it's a little bit confusing. I have this one webinar called Unlocking the Power of AI, and it goes through about how to set up a safe playground and goes through three very specific exercises for the leaders. And so these are the three areas of exercises of generative AI that I think are so helpful. And they're very simple. One is creating content. Another is conducting research and then using AI as a thought partner. And I chose these three exercises because they really demonstrate the breadth and power of AI. And these are three things that almost every single leader has to do. They have to create content, whether it's emails or presentations or plans. They are constantly creating content, and being able to show them how to use AI, generative AI, to create content better, faster, to just change the way they do things, how to overcome the tyranny of the blank page, for example. It's super helpful for them. The other thing is conducting research. Again, whenever you're thinking of using Google, maybe pause and say, maybe a generative AI model could actually do this better. And so training people on how to use AI when it's appropriate, when it's not. But I think the most important use for AI is using it as a thought partner. And this is such an important and powerful way to be thinking about AI, in that instead of trying to ask it one question and get the answer, think of it as a conversation. I think about it instead of prompt engineering, which sounds very technical, think about it as prompt conversations. And it's going to be a conversation with the AI to say, here's a plan, here's a piece, content, here are some ideas. Help me pull that, organize it, or what do you think? What are the ways that this can be improved? I constantly use AI once I've written something. I give it to it and it's like, okay, what's really good in here, but it gives some suggestions on how I can improve it. And it usually comes back with really good suggestions. So I use it almost like an editor, as a proofreader sometimes, as an idea generator, as a brainstorming partner. Again, I could do this with other people, but people aren't always available. And I find that being able to use a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini is a fantastic way to be able to get instant feedback on something and to just help you think through a particular thing. And so these are, I think, very, very specific ways to do this. Again, right, creating content, conducting research, and using AI as a thought partner. Now, one of the things I want to close out on today is that as your leaders are coming on board, it is so important to give them this scaffolding. I talk oftentimes about how important it is to create scaffolding for people when they're trying out new things, when they're experimenting with things that can feel very risky. And granted, generative AI has a lot of power to it, but there's also a lot of concern and fear and uncertainty around it. So think about the scaffolding that your leaders and executives need and be really careful and take the time to, again, align what you're trying to do with their goals so they get that excitement and that curiosity, but also at the same time, making sure that they have the support, the training, the hand holding, the peer support from their other peers, other leaders, so they can see how things could be potentially done. One of my favorite things to do, and when I'm doing these workshops, is to ask the people who raise their hands who say, Yeah, I use AI all the time. It's really changed the way I work." It's for them to tell their personal stories. It's one thing to hear it from me, from somebody who's an advocate from AI. It's another thing to hear it from your peers. And so give them the space, give them the ability to connect with each other, to show and tell how they're using generative AI with each other. All right, so that's what I have for today. I don't actually have comments today. I'm not sure if something's going on with my AI, my information here. But again, you can get the slides at charlinglee.com/get-leaders-onboard. And you can get the webinar with lots more training and details at charlinglee.com/unlock-AI. All right. I'm taking a break for a few weeks. I'll be back in 3 weeks on September 10th at 9 a.m. For our next live stream. I don't know what the topic is going to be yet at that point. We'll see what's going on with the zeitgeist out there. But have a great Labor Day over the weekend coming up, and enjoy the last few days of summer. Let's see. I have just one last comment here from Jay, squeezing in at the last minute. A leader with conviction as opposed to a leader who is a convict. Okay, I think you know what you're going on here. But I think, again, a highly political situation right now in the United States. But I think this, again, that I think, Jay, what you're pointing to is a conviction of that AI can be, that it's a highly useful tool, is something that's really important. Is in that you can show them, again, aligning it to their top strategic goals is a really good thing. I'm glad the comments are coming in here now. Let's see. Ram says, great nuggets of information. Thank you for joining today, Ram. Glad you found this super helpful. Again, see, I don't see any other comments for now, but hopefully, again, you found this information very helpful. And please, I always look for feedback after the stream is done. If you have any additional comments or context or best practices, please let me know. It's super helpful to hear from you. I really enjoy, again, I learned so much from the questions and comments from all of you. Again, thank you for watching today, and I will see you in a few weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.